Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers in search of creative teaching strategies. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm glad to welcome you to episode 44, an episode devoted entirely to creative assessments you can use with any novel this year, 25 of them to be exact. It's easy to write off some forms of creative assessment as fluff. Take, for example, a quick bell ringer asking your students to write a defense of what would be a character's favorite breakfast food. Would the character like granola and yogurt? Maybe a green smoothie and a maple oat scone? A stack of pancakes as high as the eye can see? This kind of funny brain twister is only fluff if you don't word the directions carefully. With any creative assessment, the key is to ask students to make their points based on the text, based on their analysis, based on the creative connections they can draw between our world and the world of the characters. When a student starts digging into why a character might actually choose to skip breakfast, or why a character would eat only free trade organic cage-free eggs, then you're in business. They can argue for almost anything, as long as the why behind their what is clear. That's the key phrase, the why behind the what. That's what takes it from fluff to real analysis. This episode is all about creative assessment ideas you can start using tomorrow. They can lead you and your students in wonderful creative directions as long as you build in the language and reinforce it 3 or 4 times in class that their projects need to draw carefully and clearly on what they really understand about the book. Because I'm about to share with you a very long list of ideas, I highly recommend you go check out the show notes for the podcast today. In those show notes, you can sign up for a free cheat sheet for today's episode. It's just a printable PDF of these 25 creative assessments so that you can save time and not have the trouble of taking notes while you listen. Just go to www.nowsparkcreativity.com and click on the Podcasts tab at the top of the page. There you'll find this episode as well as many others to check out if you're in the mood for a creative strategy binge listen. Okay, let's dive into it. I find that when I'm going through the world, I find so many sources of inspiration for creative projects for students. For example, flip the radio on your way to work and you've immediately got half a dozen assessment ideas. Students could create a playlist to match a character's experiences, host a literary podcast, and bring on the author of the novel for a conversation. They could script a news interview between an NPR anchor and 3 literary characters around some theme from what you're reading. They could write and perform a song about a character's development. Maybe curate a TED show, pulling together 3 existing TED Talks relating to a theme in your novel. Or even write the script for a call-in show in which characters from the novel call in for advice and discuss their problems. It's so much fun looking around for inspiration. We're going to dive in now to just 25 assessment ideas you could use for any novel. These are ones that I brainstormed this week. I hope they'll get you started brainstorming yourself too, because it's just really a blast to start making these connections between what you see around you and what students can do when they start analyzing characters, analyzing themes in this type of creative assessment. All right, number 1, students could define and defend a road trip with at least 5 destinations for a literary character. Where would a character go? Why would they go there? What would be meaningful about the trip for them? Number 2, students could create a podcast around some theme from the novel and then bring in literary characters to talk about that theme. They could all be from one book or they could be from a range of books. This could make a really cool final exam where you choose a theme that threads through your whole semester or your whole year, and they bring on characters from several novels or even plays. Number 3, propose and describe a food truck that is somehow based on a novel. So it can present key elements of the novel somehow, or it can represent the vision of one character. So for example, if Star from The Hate U Give was going to have her own food truck, what would it be like? What would be the point of it? What would the menu be like? When she drove into a community, what kind of response would she get? And what would the interactions around the truck be like? There's so much to think about when you start diving into it. Number 4, invent a clothing line with a character as the designer, including the names and elements of some of the collections that the character would design and some information about what sort of show or event that clothing designer would put on. If they had a runway show, what types of pieces would be shown and what would be the meaning behind those pieces. Number 5, imagine a literary character started a Kickstarter campaign. It could be to start a business. It could be to support some cause. It could be for anything. You can go on Kickstarter and look at some examples and then start thinking, what would a character want to raise money for? The student would need to invent whatever the campaign is going to be, describe it, explain its nature and purpose, and make connections between that campaign and what they really understand about the character from the book. Number 6, create an escape room based on a novel. So they could do this in small groups or individually or as a class. How could they create clues that other students could unlock to understand and develop their analysis of the novel? You could have one section create an escape room for another section, or you could divide your students into groups and have the different groups create escape rooms for each other, and then go ahead and actually do them. It would make an amazing culmination to a unit. Number 7, I've done this quite a bit and it's really fun. Script and put on a 1-minute dramatic version of a novel. So take a long book, maybe Moby Dick or The Hate You Give, and have students condense it to what they think is the absolute most important action. It's going to be super fast. Then after they perform, consider letting the class vote on awards for different performances, like the clearest interpretation, best depiction of a single character, best explanation of a theme. Number 8, let them dive into the wide world of social media, which they love to do anyway, and create an Instagram account for a character in the novel. Here they have to really start thinking, what would the themes be like, the colors be like, the captions be like, the hashtags be like? What would the photography be like, or the graphics, or the drawings? They could do it however they wanted to. And it's not just about being artistic. It's about expressing something about the character through the writing, through the graphics, and through the thinking of pulling it all together. Number 9, take a bunch of characters from one novel or from several novels or a novel and 2 plays and script a dinner party between them. So choose some themes that would be important for students to discuss and put those out there and say, choose 2 or 3 of these themes and 3 or 4 characters and have them talk. Create the script and really get into what matters. Number 10, create a podcast based on an important theme in the novel. Include at least one interview with a character, as well as other types of segments. If you did this, you'd probably want to listen to some different podcasts in class so they get an idea of the different types of segments that go into a podcast and the different threads that they could use to tie in with a novel. Number 11, start a YouTube channel for a character. So if they did this project, you could actually have them do a video, or you could just have them create a proposal for a YouTube channel. What would a character like Jane Austen's Emma, for example, start a YouTube channel about? Would she give love advice, fashion advice? Would she just vlog and talk about her own personal experiences? What would S.E. Hinton's Pony Boy start a channel about? Would he try to create some sort of catchy channel to prevent bullying? Would he just share his life? Would he read poetry out loud? Would he start a nature channel because he loves the beauty of the country so much? Let students decide for themselves and explain why that channel would be a really important project for the character. That's where you get into the character analysis. Number 12, let students create a graphic novel version of their favorite part of the novel. So they go back through, they find the climax, or they find a really important moment for a character, and they translate that into art. And then they explain why they did it the way they did it. There are a million ways to create a graphic novel, different ways to show perspective, different pieces of dialogue to highlight, different moments to highlight. Why did they do what they did? Number 13, let students propose film versions of a novel. So they can storyboard a trailer, or they can just do a proposal in writing to talk about what their film production would be like and why. Similarly, number 14, write a script proposal for a TV series inspired by a novel. Imagine they were pitching to Netflix and they wanted to turn Wuthering Heights or Sense and Sensibility or I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter into a TV series. What would the TV series be like? Who would star in it? Why would it be an important thing to bring to the public? And what would be their spin on the book and why? Number 15, take a novel, turn it into a short play as a class, rehearse it, and put it on. Invite local guests, invite the freshman class, or invite parents, or invite students from the elementary school. Let's see, what are we on, guys? I don't know anymore. The next one, have students create artistic pieces inspired by a text and showcase them in a gallery. So whatever it is, it could be a photo essay, it could be a painting, it could be a sculpture. They need to create something, anything that interests them, and then make the connections. Talk about why they made what they made and how it carries through the meaning and what's important to them about the text. Next up, have students in groups create literary murals based on a text. So if they were going to have an entire wall, what would they put on it to represent something like The Outsiders? Or what would they put on it to represent The Giver? Have them create a proposal. Then vote on the best as a class and actually go do it somewhere. Find a boring old wall in your school and get permission, or a wall under a highway bridge in your community, and put up a literary mural. What an amazing thing that would be for students to remember. Next up, design one-pagers. This is something I've gotten really into this year, and you can go back and listen to an episode I did in the spring about one-pagers if you're interested. But this is a really cool strategy where students kind of condense everything they understand about something into one page of drawings and text. So create a one-pager revolving around a poetry unit or a novel, a podcast or a film, or connecting multiple genres together to show their understanding. Next, write and then submit an essay or a creative piece based on the text to a writing contest. Find a writing contest that they could submit to. Somehow that authentic audience makes the process of writing so much more exciting. So whether you have them write a short story based on the themes from a novel or an analytical essay, find a place for it to go. I think that makes a huge difference. You're doing great, guys. We have a few left. Create a playlist for one character during the novel, matching the songs that you choose, or matching the songs that students choose with experiences, moods, thoughts, goals for that character. Anything going on in the character's head, crucial moments can be represented by the songs. And then, of course, you have the students explain their choices and defend them. Now, here's one I really like. It's got a nice STEM connection. Have students design one character's dream house. What makes this house so perfect for them? What would be in the different rooms? What kinds of rooms would there be? Where would the house be? And then remind them they need to base their choices on evidence from the text. This isn't just a random flight of architectural fancy. They're going to really dive into the analysis. Why would the character want this house to be exactly the way it is? Imagine a character became the host of a TV show. Have students think about what a character would host. What would the show be about? Who would come on the show? Why would they come on the show? Who would watch? How popular would it be? All those types of questions. Invite students to create a photo essay or just a photo series that somehow represents the themes of a novel and defend their choices. This one's kind of interesting for its interdisciplinary connections between history and English. Invite students to write a letter to the editor of the New York Times based on some article they read in the week's paper. So connect the character and the character's feelings and thoughts and motivations with what's going on today. What would the character think about X, Y, and Z that's happening in the world, and why. I think you want to have the students write the letter to the editor and then also write a short explanation of why they wrote what they wrote. All right, and finally, have students imagine that a character from a novel had a chance to address their high school graduation. So they take the stage, they're going to give some piece of advice supported by little stories and anecdotes to the senior class and all of their parents and friends. What would the character say? Have them write the speech and then again write some sort of short explanation why this graduation address. So guys, you get the idea. It's a lot of fun. Once you start, you can't stop. I think you're going to be seeing inspiration everywhere for this sort of creative assessment. You open up your morning newspaper and you're going to get a ton of ideas. Walk into a restaurant, you're going to get a ton of ideas. Walk down the street, open your phone. There's just inspiration everywhere for ways of helping students connect what they're reading to our world. And it's really fun. So just remember to have them focus on the why behind the what, and you can build almost anything into your creative assessment. Thanks for tuning in today. Remember to go check out the show notes where you'll find that printable list of all 25 of these ideas. If you have a second to screenshot this episode on your phone and add it to your Instagram stories, I'd love to say hello there. Just tag me at NowSparkCreativity so I can check out your story. I'll be sharing a lot of them in my stories too. The Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. The Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more podcast recommendations, visit edupodcastnetwork.com.